So good day there, wonderful folks, and welcome back to the channel. Today, been a bit inspired by, as I imagine, a lot of folks dealing with a lot of doom scrolling and stuff lately, and I've noticed that I'm often watching through streams of videos of people doing different types of crafts, and I'll feel kind of inspired to go and do something like it, but you see them doing whether it's cooking or woodworking or blacksmithing or all those sorts of things. Very quickly, I realize, look, I don't have the skills, I don't have the techniques, I don't have the materials or the actual kind of the tools really to do any of these projects. Um, and that sort of starts this kind of a bit of a spiral. You go, I really wanted to get something done. Was really inspired by this, but I can't, and it feels kind of bad. So I tried to think back. I used to do a fair bit of things like woodwork, cooking, painting, just trying new things when it came to crafts. And I was like, well, what was I doing before? Before, getting stuck in the doom scroll, before that kind of isolation period that I think a lot of us experienced during COVID, and a lot of us are still kind of stuck in that loop. And I realized the difference between now sort of scrolling through, seeing someone do something that I don't have the tools, is a lot of the places that I was finding inspiration for crafts before were coming from like books. I would have a book on jewelry processes or something, for example, or little pamphlets on woodworking, or model railroad magazines, and finding little tidbits of information, of processes, and going, oh, okay. And what sort of sticks out to me about that is one, it's not an accident. You go searching for a project, so you pick up a woodworking book and you look through that book until you find a woodworking project that you might be able to do, which means you're less at the whims of, I guess I'm inspired to try something when it scrolls on the feed. You're sort of set. You're already like, I want to look for a woodworking project, and you find something that you can sort of stick with. And the other thing that I sort of realized was a lot of the books that I was reading and a lot of the places I was getting this information and this inspiration from uh, were sort of at a level where they didn't expect certain degrees of skills or prior knowledge or tech, um, the simple recipe books, or things that were made for teaching, like we might roll across a professional woodworker doing something on TikTok or whatever, but it's not often, and there are creators doing it, and they're amazing, but it's not often that you scroll across someone who's explicitly trying to do an educational for the beginner kind of introduction, and what I've found going through and growing up and being able to find more of my own resources is I have this absolute adoration of finding old books, old resources, old texts and textbooks, old styles and things that I want to emulate in the things I'm creating and the things that I have in my space. And what happens there is I kind of realize that I've actually collected quite a range of books and documents and files and all that sort of stuff, which are craft books. They're books on crafts that actually contain a lot of really interesting information. So today we're going to try and go through a couple of these books, and we're going to see what we can sort of glean from them, and talk about some of the projects I've made that actually I've used these books for in the past. And a bit of a mindset shift for me. Like, I really want to sort of switch to actually, using the resources I've got, using my books, looking through, finding things I can do, and trying to make those things, whether that be cooking, whether that be letter writing, woodworking, any of that sort of stuff. So we're going to take a look at some of them right now. Now, the camera's only going to be this way because I broke the back camera on my phone, so that'll be fine. So one of the things I wanted to start off with, because it's something I think all of us have done as a kid, is kind of make those little, take a piece of paper, you fold it up, you staple it in the middle, you got a little book now. I love doing that. You know, it was something I love doing. And when I realized that a lot of old books were actually, you know, folded in similar ways and sewn together and bound, that was like change for me. That was like a mental shift. And then, you know, it sort of was a big thing that picked up during the pandemic, during the isolation periods. A lot of people were binding their own books. Now, if you've watched the videos, like me, sometimes you kind of go, well, I can see that process, I can see that process, and I can see that process, but there's a lot of skipping, and there's not a lot of really in-depth information. And I know the first couple of times I tried to follow a video tutorial, I got very lost. And my partner actually gifted me a book on book repair and conservation. Now this is it's an old library book. It would have been from a Douglas Valley Branch Library. Yeah. This is full of not only information on the certain types and styles of binding, sewing, things that you would need to make a book from scratch, but it's also got information on repair. And that's something I don't often see come up. So the idea of printing, folding, sewing sheaves of paper together and then trying to form them into a full, you know, book and do all that sort of stuff may seem a lot, but if you've just got to resew a headband or maybe do a page repair or any of that sort of stuff, that kind of makes that seem like less of a big process. It's like, well, I don't have to make a whole book from scratch. I can just fix one I've already got. So I've done a couple of those repairs on some of the books I've had. But because it's also got information on bookbinding itself, I had found books in places like the Internet Archive where you've got PDFs of loads and loads of books, especially old books, lots of books in the public domain. And I want some physical copies of these, and I've been reading this, I've been learning about bookbinding, and I was like, oh, I might give it a go, you know, because that makes kind of sense to me. So another thing that we can find is there are lots of things we don't do today that could be fun, that could be just a way to kind of give yourself something to do with your hands if that's something you feel like you've been lacking, a little bit of mindfulness. So I found a book on writing letters, basically, like if you are giving someone condolence, or if you're congratulating someone on an engagement, or you're writing to get a job as a tenured professor at a university, like how would you structure your letters? So I found one of them on the Internet Archive, and I printed it out, and using the information from here, I bound it. And like this whole process from sewing the ends, and it's not perfect. It's absolutely not a perfect bind, but I've now got something that I can sort of sit down and read and look at, you know. So this is really fun. I've used this as a basis for a lot of letters and writing in that sort of letter format. I've even got in here, these are some stamps that I actually designed, topsoil stamps. So designed them, laid them out, printed them out, and perforated the paper so that I could have some little stamps on the front. There's another little one there. So that was really fun. And learning how to write letters and do those forms of correspondence were great, because, you know, it meant that I could basically copy out a letter from in here, copy out a format from in there, and I'd be practicing my handwriting, I'd be practicing the style, and I'd be learning a bit sort of how they were written, so that I could bring that into any fiction that I was writing. Now, I learnt the bookbinding, I learnt the letters, and in the letters books, I started to kind of see there's a lot of things in there for, say you were a carpenter and you weren't paid. Here's an invoice for how you would write an invoice for a chest built, or if you were searching for work for a carpenter to do work, here's how you would write what you want, and include the pricing and the plans for the thing that you desire. And a lot of that made me sort of think back to my childhood and go, I used to read a lot of like woodworking magazines and look for little projects and stuff there. And so I sort of began this obsession of really wanting to find a woodworking Bible, basically, like a book that really had everything in it. And a lot of times you get these really lovely modern books that have, full color illustrations and all that sort of stuff. But there is often a focus on, using power tools and things that are just completely out of range. And you get halfway through a project. If you're like me, you don't read all the instructions first, something I'm trying to fix. But you get halfway through a project and you go, cool, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And they go, now, to actually form the structure, you need to route a sort of a clamp edge into all of the pieces of wood, otherwise the whole thing doesn't come together. Very quickly, it's like, oh, well, it means I can't finish this project now. So I looked around, I found some these books. There's lots of books on projects that you can try. So you get a lot more plans in there, but not so much the actual the learning. But then I realized, like, a lot of my issue came from the fact that I didn't have access to power tools. And you know who else didn't have access to power tools? Well, a lot of people in the past. So I realized that looking for actual old books on woodworking was a really good way to get an idea of how to do the woodworking if you don't have a circular saw or a drill press and all those sorts of things. So this book here is just lovingly illustrated, but they talk about different wood joints and stuff. They talk about every single way that you can cut them, and there's the expectation that you'll be doing that with a handsaw, so then there's no sort of belief that you'll be using a router or anything. It's like handsaw and chisel is the tools that they expect that you will have access to. Yes, it's slower, but handsaw and a chisel, even if you want really, really high quality ones, you could set yourself back $250. The highest quality sort of in both of them, like middling high quality. But like, you could also pick up a $30 saw and a $20 chisel, use the information in those books on how to sharpen them or to fix the handles when anything breaks, and all of a sudden you've got everything that you need to do those projects. And you look at that, and you look at some of these more modern books or these project books, and immediately you go, okay, well, I actually know what that type of joint is like. Okay, yeah, and I know how they made that shape there. Okay, using that plane. Like, that gives you a bit more leeway. Of course, it takes longer, but it is something you can do with your hands, with simple tools, and you can make things, such as... It's actually books like that helped me work out how to build this little tool for this little box for my barbecue tools out of the box. It's books like that went, okay, well, here's how you can cut a sort of a chamfer on that edge. Here's different sort of connective methods, stuff that you can use to make your like a box. And that, like, this is based on a sort of a chuck wagon, very much that kind of, you can imagine that on the side of an old wagon rolling down the trails. So yeah, a really interesting something that I built using knowledge that I got from those sorts of books. So yeah, absolutely, really an option. Find those old woodwork books. and give those things a try. Now, the crux of this video is kind of where I've come in. I've often been in places where I really haven't had the space to do the craft projects that I would like, whether that be woodwork, whether that be the bookbinding, even, not having a proper desk space in some places. But one of the things that we all need to do, and that we usually have facilities to do in the places that we live, is to eat. We all need to eat. And especially when folks are dealing with the price of food, the price of living, ready-made things become a lot harder to deal with. So it's raining. That's okay. We'll stick with it. Something like this. Now, this is my absolute favorite in terms of cookery books. I've got French gastronomy books. I've got the Cordon Bleu. I've got dictionaries and encyclopedias of Italian cooking and all that sort of stuff. Something like this, the Australian School of Mines cookery book. It is lovingly annotated, drawn up with all these different notes by the previous owners that explain how to make these super simple recipes using things like flour and butter and onions and potatoes. Like we've got Yorkshire pudding, potato scones, cooking scalloped beef, different casseroles and stuff, egg and bacon pies. Very simple, but lovingly cared for, nutritious books, food. And the books themselves, you'll find just a little bit extra sugar here, just a bit of lemon here, or there's a lot of, let's see if I can find one. There's a lot of ticks, like actual little check marks on, there we go. Little tick here next to pressure cooking. So it's either those sorts of things of when it's being used in the school, the tick can come from the, like, we've completed this section. Or what also happens is there are all these adjustments and rewritten bits in different coloured pens, and I imagine this is something that's kept with someone over time. And, there are recipes that get all these sorts of like checks and annotations and tried this, tried that, did that. You're continuing on and you'll find these for $2 in an op shop, You're continuing the culinary tradition of a person who has likely passed away, and being able to, try the potato scones with a little bit of nutmeg added because it brings something else to the flavor, like it kind of feels like you're taking a part of that person with you. Now, there's your comic cookbooks for, I really don't want to cook. Here's some simple methods. Here's how to make everything easy. Start in the morning, do this, slow cooking, all that sort of stuff. You've got your more complex things. One of the other things I love is, this is the other half of the egg. So if you're making meringues and you're using all the egg whites, well, you go to the yolk section here and you work out what you can make with the yolks. If you're making hollandaise, I think one of those sauces only uses egg yolks. Well, there's a section here for what you do with the whites. But that's really the process. Like we are crafty people, We like to make things and put things together and do things. And I think, personally, no matter the situation, we can always find some way to really have a go and have a craft. And I think if we're so used to scrolling through and getting inspired to do a recipe and then going, actually, I don't have filleted anchovies from Spain at my local grocery store. I can't make it now. Like, finding things that are local, finding things that don't expect you to have the space, the materials, all that sort of stuff, and really giving things a go. I think there's a really helpful, mindful kind of healing process to that. So, my recommendation, if you still feel stuck, if you're in a place of isolation, if you just really want to be doing something and picking up things, I recommend starting with the cookbooks. Like I said, you can find a book like this for $2. It's going to be part of someone else's life passed down to you. Basically, you can read through all the annotations. Know that this was been lovingly next to some of the nicest home cooked meals that have been made. You start with something like that. You just try and cook a couple recipes. You might get into letter writing with a friend, or even just for the skill. Maybe you're trying to practice your penmanship. You can find a lot of those books online. Like I said, on the Internet Archives, it's a great resource. But go find a craft book. You might have some at home that you haven't actually looked over, or you might have a friend who's got some that they might be willing to lend. Local libraries are always a wonderful resource, but op shops, antique stores, just take a look, find these places. I think older can be better in this regard. A lot of the modern things, like I say, they expect you to have stand mixers and power tools and all these sorts of things, and they can often be very almost 5 minutes crafty in their kind of format. It's very like, do this and then try this and then throw this and then flambe it and then it's done. It's like, what's that step? Whereas something like this, it's expecting this is for school children to learn how to cook. So it expects you to be at a slower level. It expects you to learn from the ground up. It's not just a sort of a collection of recipes or a sort of a celebrity cookbook. Like it's really sort of heartfelt, I guess. But start with something like that. Start with some of these older things, and make it a kind of habit. Go, okay, I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to buy some standard ingredients, and just one day a week, every Sunday or something, a day that you don't have much else on, go, I'm going to try cooking one of these recipes, or over this month I might try and do one of the woodworking projects from in here, or even just learn how to sharpen a chisel and get that really down to a thing. So practice and learn skills and crafts, I think. It helped me. It's helped me a lot. It's obviously not a complete replacement for things like therapy or talking to other human beings. But for those moments when you're alone, when you feel like you're isolated and you just really want to give something a go, do something with your hands, you can't do any worse than giving a bit of a craft a go. So I hope this video has been of some inspiration. If you've got any stories like this, if you want to pass on some extra details, or say that if you've been inspired by this to do something, bring me your stories. I'd love to hear about them. So remember to like the video, subscribe so you can follow along. Do a lot of world building and stuff here as well as try and work on some of those physical projects and stuff. But mostly we just try to have a bit of fun and do something whenever we can. Videos every week. Thank you very much. See you for now. Bye.